Marco Bianchi stood at his bedroom mirror, adjusting his tie with considerable irritation, genuinely dreading the evening ahead. At 34 years old, he controlled one of the city's most feared criminal organizations, commanded absolute respect from hundreds of men, and possessed more wealth than he could properly spend in several lifetimes. Yet none of that mattered tonight, as he prepared for yet another arranged introduction his mother had insisted upon. He studied his reflection carefully, his broad shoulders and considerable size filling the mirror completely. He had always been a large man, tall and heavily built, features that had brought him nothing but painful rejection throughout his entire adult life whenever romance became a genuine possibility. Women found him intimidating at first, then, once they grew comfortable enough to speak honestly, they inevitably mentioned his size as though it were some kind of unfortunate obstacle to overcome, rather than simply who he genuinely was. He had stopped actively pursuing romance nearly 5 years earlier, tired of watching disappointment flicker across women's faces when they registered his considerable bulk. Tired of overhearing whispered comments about his weight from women who had initially seemed interested in his wealth and power alone. You cannot hide from marriage forever. Marco, his mother Isabella, had insisted just days earlier, her expression carrying genuine maternal concern. I found someone wonderful. Daniela Rossi, from the Rossi family. She's kind, intelligent, and genuinely lovely. Please, just meet her once before dismissing this possibility entirely. Marco had reluctantly agreed, more to satisfy his mother's persistent worry than any genuine hope this meeting might prove. Different from his considerable history of romantic disappointment, the restaurant his mother had selected was elegant but comfortable. A quiet Italian establishment known for genuine, unpretentious hospitality rather than pretentious formality. Marco arrived precisely on time, settling into their reserved private table with considerable resignation about the evening ahead. Daniela Rossi arrived 7 minutes later, considerably flustered, her cheeks flushed pink from what appeared to be a rushed journey. She was a warm, curvy woman, with kind brown eyes and dark hair pulled back, in a style that had partially escaped its careful arrangement. Several loose strands framing her genuine, slightly embarrassed smile. "I'm so sorry I'm late," she said breathlessly, settling into the chair across from him. "My taxi got stuck behind some kind of parade, and I ended up walking the last several blocks in these ridiculous heels." Marco found himself genuinely surprised by her immediate, unguarded honesty, considerably different from the carefully composed introductions he'd grown accustomed to throughout his considerable romantic history. "It's genuinely fine," he said, something almost like amusement flickering behind his usually controlled expression. "I appreciate the honesty rather than some elaborate excuse." Daniela laughed warmly, genuine relief evident in her expression. "I'm not particularly skilled at elaborate excuses," she admitted. "I tend toward complete honesty, even when that honesty is somewhat embarrassing." Their conversation began somewhat awkwardly, both clearly aware of the arranged nature of their meeting, though Daniela's genuine warmth gradually eased some of Marco's initial reluctance. She asked genuine questions about his interests beyond simple business matters, laughed easily at his occasional dry humor, and demonstrated considerable genuine curiosity about topics ranging from Italian architecture to obscure historical trivia. Then, reaching for her wine glass with enthusiastic gesture while making a particularly animated point about her favorite childhood books, Daniela's elbow caught the edge of the table awkwardly, sending her wine glass tumbling directly into a delicate vase of flowers positioned nearby. The vase toppled immediately, shattering loudly against the restaurant's polished floor, water and scattered flowers spreading dramatically across the elegant dining space. Daniela froze in obvious horror, her cheeks flushing deep crimson as several nearby diners turned to observe the commotion. "Oh no," she said, genuine mortification evident in her voice. "I am so incredibly sorry. This is exactly the kind of thing that always happens to me." Marco watched, genuinely uncertain how to respond, half expecting her to dissolve into embarrassed apology or nervous defensive explanation. Instead, after several seconds of obvious horror, Daniela suddenly burst into genuine, unrestrained laughter. "I promise I'm not usually this catastrophically clumsy," she managed between genuine giggles, "though clearly tonight has decided to prove me wrong rather dramatically." Something shifted unexpectedly within Marco's carefully guarded chest at her genuine, unbothered reaction. Every woman he'd previously dated would have either dissolved into mortified apology or attempted to blame the accident on something beyond her control. Daniela simply laughed at herself, genuine warmth and self-acceptance evident despite her obvious embarrassment. "Please allow me," Marco said, genuine amusement now clearly evident as he signaled discreetly toward the restaurant staff to properly address the spilled wine and broken vase. "I promise this isn't typical first-date behavior," Daniela said, still smiling despite her lingering embarrassment. "Though perhaps it's genuinely appropriate, given that neither of us particularly chose this meeting ourselves." Marco felt something genuinely warm, building steadily as their conversation continued despite the chaotic interruption. "I appreciate your honesty," he said sincerely. "Most people attempt considerable performance during these arranged introductions. I've never been particularly skilled at performance," Daniela admitted. "I tend to simply be myself, clumsiness and all, regardless of how that authenticity might be received." Something about her genuine confidence, her comfortable acceptance of her own imperfections, struck Marco considerably more powerfully than any calculated charm or careful beauty could have achieved. He found himself genuinely curious about this warm, authentic woman, considerably more interested in continuing their conversation than he'd anticipated feeling before this dinner began. As their evening continued, gradually settling into genuinely comfortable, easy conversation despite its chaotic beginning, Marco found himself experiencing something he hadn't felt in considerable years, genuine hope that perhaps this particular arranged meeting might prove different from his extensive history of romantic disappointment. When the evening finally concluded, Marco walked Daniela toward her waiting car, genuine reluctance evident in his usually controlled demeanor about the evening ending. "I'd like to see you again," he said, genuine sincerity evident in his careful words. Surprising himself with this unexpected admission, Daniela studied him carefully, genuine warmth evident in her expression. "I'd like that very much," she said honestly. "Despite my catastrophic first impression involving broken vases and spilled wine." Marco found himself genuinely smiling, an expression that felt unfamiliar after years of careful, controlled composure. "I've found your catastrophic first impression considerably more genuine than most people's carefully rehearsed performances," he said sincerely. As Daniela's car pulled away, Marco remained standing outside the restaurant, genuine surprise building at his own unexpected reaction to this arranged meeting he had dreaded so completely just hours earlier. For the first time in 5 long years, he found himself genuinely looking forward to seeing someone again, uncertain exactly what this unexpected connection might eventually mean for his carefully guarded, lonely heart. Over the following 3 weeks, Marco and Daniela met regularly, their families genuinely pleased by this unexpected promising development following the initially awkward arranged introduction. Their conversations grew increasingly comfortable, both discovering genuine warmth and understanding beneath their respective guarded exteriors. "Can I ask you something personal?" Daniela said one evening as they walked together through a quiet park near her apartment, the autumn evening carrying pleasant, crisp air around them. "Of course," Marco said, genuine curiosity evident in his tone. "Why haven't you married before now?" Daniela asked carefully. "You're successful, intelligent, genuinely kind beneath your controlled exterior. I imagine considerable women would have been interested throughout your life." Marco's expression grew somewhat guarded, though genuine trust building between them gradually encouraged honest response. Women have shown initial interest, he admitted quietly, until they properly registered my size, my considerable bulk that seems to make most women reconsider their initial attraction rather quickly. Daniela's expression carried genuine sympathy at this admission. That sounds remarkably painful, she said softly. It became easier to simply avoid romance entirely, Marco continued, genuine vulnerability evident beneath his careful composure. Rather than continuing to experience that particular disappointment repeatedly, I understand that feeling considerably more than you might expect, Daniela said quietly. Genuine shared understanding evident in her tone. What do you mean? Marco asked, genuine curiosity building. Daniela considered her response carefully before continuing. I've spent my entire adult life feeling essentially invisible, she admitted. Men typically overlook me entirely in favor of women who fit society's narrow standards more comfortably. When they do notice me, it's often simply as someone's amusing friend, never as someone genuinely desirable. That's genuinely difficult to imagine, Marco said sincerely. You're remarkably warm, intelligent, genuinely delightful company. Thank you, Daniela said, genuine warmth evident in her expression, despite the vulnerable admission. Though society's beauty standards rarely account for warmth or intelligence when determining who deserves genuine romantic attention, their shared understanding of rejection based on physical appearance created unexpected, genuine common ground between them, both recognizing in the other someone who genuinely understood the particular pain of being dismissed for reasons entirely unrelated to their actual character or worth. I've always believed, Marco said carefully, that genuine attraction should encompass considerably more than simple physical measurements. Character, warmth, genuine connection, these matter far more than whatever narrow standards society typically prioritizes. I genuinely appreciate hearing you say that, Daniela said softly, though I'll admit considerable experience has made trusting that sentiment somewhat difficult. I understand that hesitation completely, Marco said, though I hope, given time, I might help demonstrate that genuine sentiment through consistent action rather than simply words alone. As their relationship continued deepening over subsequent weeks, Marco found himself sharing increasingly personal history he'd rarely discussed with anyone beyond his closest family members. He told Daniela about his teenage years, when his considerable size had made him the target of cruel schoolyard mockery, about his first serious relationship in his early 20s, that had ended when his girlfriend admitted she felt embarrassed introducing him to her considerably more image-conscious friends. That's genuinely cruel, Daniela said, genuine anger evident in her voice at this painful revelation. Judging someone's worth based on something as superficial as their physical size, I've made peace with it. Mostly, Marco admitted, though genuine lingering pain remained evident beneath his careful composure. Though I'll confess, that acceptance required considerable time and deliberate effort. Daniela reached for his hand gently, genuine warmth evident in her careful touch. For what it's worth, she said sincerely, I find your size considerably comforting rather than off-putting. There's something genuinely reassuring about your presence, Marco. Something warm and unfamiliar moved through Marco's chest at her honest, genuine admission. I feel similarly about you, he said quietly. Your warmth, your genuine authenticity, considerably outweighs whatever narrow standards society might prioritize. Their growing connection continued deepening through these honest, vulnerable conversations, both discovering genuine comfort in finally being seen and appreciated for who they authentically were, rather than constantly measured against unrealistic, narrow standards neither of them naturally fit. Meanwhile, within Marco's dangerous professional world, his organization's members began noticing his unusual, uncharacteristic happiness following these regular meetings with Daniela. Antonio, his most trusted lieutenant, observed this remarkable change with genuine curiosity during one of their regular strategic meetings. "You seem different lately, sir," Antonio observed carefully. "More relaxed, considerably less guarded than usual." Marco considered this observation thoughtfully before responding. "Perhaps I am," he acknowledged, genuine warmth evident in his tone, despite his usual careful composure. "Daniela has shown me something I hadn't experienced in considerable years. Genuine acceptance without any conditions attached. That's genuinely wonderful to witness, sir," Antonio said sincerely. "You deserve genuine happiness, regardless of whatever insecurities your considerable size might have previously created." As Marco's connection with Daniela continued deepening, however, unwanted attention began building from unexpected sources. Vittorio Sallucci, head of a rival organization that had long sought opportunities to challenge Marco's territorial control, learned through careful surveillance about this unusual, uncharacteristic attachment developing between Marco and his arranged bride. "He's genuinely falling for this woman," Vittorio's informant reported during a private meeting. "Regular meetings, considerable emotional investment evident in his behavior these past several weeks." Vittorio considered this information carefully, genuine calculation evident behind his sharp, assessing expression. "Marco Bianchi has always maintained careful emotional distance throughout his adult life," he said thoughtfully. "If he's genuinely developed attachment toward this particular woman, that represents exactly the kind of exploitable vulnerability I've been searching for regarding his previously impenetrable position." "What are you suggesting specifically?" his lieutenant asked carefully. "I'm suggesting," Vittorio said, genuine dangerous calculation evident in his tone, "that we investigate this Daniela Rossi thoroughly. If Marco genuinely cares about her safety, she represents considerable leverage against his organization's continued dominance." Back within Marco's considerably happier, unaware existence, he and Daniela continued building their genuine, meaningful connection, both increasingly hopeful about a future together neither had previously believed possible, given their respective histories of painful romantic rejection. "I want you to know something," Marco said one evening, as they shared dinner together in his private dining room, genuine sincerity evident in his careful words. "These past weeks with you have shown me genuine happiness I'd stopped believing myself capable of experiencing." "I feel exactly the same way," Daniela said softly, genuine warmth evident in her expression. "For the first time in my adult life, I feel genuinely seen and appreciated, rather than simply tolerated or overlooked. Neither of them could have anticipated, in that quiet, meaningful moment of genuine connection and growing happiness, exactly how soon their carefully building trust and safety would face dangerous, unexpected threat from Marco's complicated criminal world, a threat that would test everything they'd begun building together against forces neither could have properly anticipated. As weeks turned into 2 full months, Marco found himself genuinely falling for Daniela in ways he hadn't experienced in over a decade. Her warmth, her genuine humor about her own imperfections, her unwavering authenticity, all of it had gradually dismantled the careful emotional walls he'd constructed after years of painful romantic rejection. Yet despite these genuine, deepening feelings, Marco found himself hesitant to fully express his emotions, old insecurities whispering persistent doubt despite Daniela's consistent, genuine affection. "You seem distracted tonight," Daniela observed during one of their regular dinners together. Genuine concern evident in her careful expression, Marco considered how honestly to respond. Genuine vulnerability warring against his usual careful composure. "I've been thinking about us," he admitted finally. "About how genuinely happy these past months have made me. That sounds like something worth celebrating, not something causing obvious distraction," Daniela said gently. "I suppose I'm still waiting for the inevitable disappointment," Marco admitted honestly, genuine fear evident beneath his careful words. "Every previous relationship eventually revealed that my size represented an obstacle my partner couldn't genuinely overcome. Regardless of their initial claims otherwise, Daniela's expression softened considerably at this honest admission, genuine understanding evident in her warm gaze. "I understand that fear," she said softly. "I carry similar insecurities, constantly waiting for you to realize you could find someone considerably more conventionally attractive than someone like me." "That's genuinely absurd," Marco said firmly, surprising himself with his own immediate, protective response. "You're remarkably beautiful, Daniela. Your warmth, your genuine laugh, the way your eyes light up when discussing something you're passionate about, all of it makes you considerably more attractive than any narrow societal standard could properly capture." Genuine emotion flooded through Daniela's expression at his sincere, heartfelt words. "You truly mean that," she said softly, more observation than question. "Completely," Marco confirmed, reaching for her hand gently across the table. "I've spent considerable time waiting for disappointment that genuinely isn't coming, Daniela. What I feel for you isn't diminished by insecurity or hesitation. It's simply genuine, growing love that I've been afraid to properly voice." Something profoundly moved passed across Daniela's expression at his sincere admission. "I love you too, Marco," she said softly, genuine sincerity evident in her voice. "Completely, without any reservation about your size or anything else society might consider imperfect." Genuine relief and joy flooded through Marco's chest at her honest reciprocation. Years of careful emotional guard finally beginning to genuinely dissolve in the face of her unwavering, authentic acceptance. "I've never experienced anything like this," he admitted quietly. "Genuine love without any conditions attached." "Neither have I," Daniela said, genuine warmth evident in her expression. "I think we've both spent considerable time believing genuine, unconditional love simply wasn't available to people like us, given society's narrow standards. As their relationship deepened into genuine mutual love, both Marco and Daniela found themselves increasingly confident about building a genuine future together. Their family's initial arranged introduction, having transformed into something considerably more meaningful than either had anticipated when first agreeing to that chaotic first dinner. Meanwhile, Vittorio Salucci's investigation into Daniela had progressed considerably, his careful surveillance confirming Marco's genuine, deepening attachment toward his previously arranged bride. Their relationship has clearly moved beyond simple arranged obligation, Vittorio's informant reported during another tense strategic meeting. Marco visits her apartment regularly. They've been seen together at numerous public locations. Genuine affection evident throughout their interactions. Vittorio considered this confirmation carefully, genuine calculation building behind his sharp, assessing expression. "This confirms exactly what I suspected," he said thoughtfully. "Marco Bianchi has finally developed genuine vulnerability after years of careful emotional isolation. This woman represents precisely the leverage necessary to finally challenge his previously impenetrable territorial control." "What specifically are you planning?" his lieutenant asked carefully. "Patience, for now," Vittorio said, genuine calculated restraint evident in his careful planning. "I want comprehensive understanding of her daily routine, her vulnerabilities, before we consider our next strategic move. Rushing this opportunity risks squandering exactly the kind of significant leverage we've searched for regarding Marco's previously untouchable position back within Marco's considerably happier existence. Entirely unaware of the dangerous scrutiny his growing relationship had attracted, he and Daniela continued building their genuine connection, both increasingly confident about pursuing marriage not simply as arranged family obligation, but as genuine, mutual choice built on authentic love and understanding. "I want to properly propose," Marco told his mother one afternoon, genuine excitement evident in his voice despite his usual controlled demeanor. "Not simply completing the arranged marriage you originally suggested, but genuinely asking Daniela to marry me because I love her completely." Isabella's expression carried genuine joy at her son's unprecedented happiness. "I'm so genuinely pleased for you both," she said warmly. "I'd hoped this arrangement might lead toward genuine happiness, though I never anticipated witnessing you this genuinely transformed by love. She's shown me acceptance I'd stopped believing possible," Marco admitted honestly. "I want to spend my life properly demonstrating that same unconditional acceptance in return." As Marco began planning his proper, heartfelt proposal, genuine excitement building about the future he and Daniela were preparing to build together, neither of them could anticipate exactly how quickly Vittorio's patient, calculated investigation was approaching the moment he considered perfect for finally exploiting this genuine, vulnerable connection against Marco's continued organizational authority. On a quiet Tuesday evening, as Daniela walked home from her regular yoga class, entirely unaware of the careful surveillance that had been tracking her routine for weeks, she noticed an unfamiliar black car parked along her usual route, positioned with unusual, deliberate attention toward her apartment building's entrance. She dismissed the observation initially, attributing her mild unease to simple imagination rather than genuine concern. She had no way of knowing that this unfamiliar vehicle represented the beginning of exactly the dangerous threat Marco's happier, more open heart had inadvertently created within his carefully guarded criminal world. 3 days after Daniela first noticed the unfamiliar black car near her apartment, Vittorio Cellucci decided the time had finally arrived to properly exploit Marco's genuine vulnerability regarding his beloved bride-to-be. "I want her brought to our secondary location," Vittorio instructed his lieutenant firmly, quietly, without unnecessary violence, "though I want Marco to understand clearly that her safety depends entirely on his willingness to properly negotiate our territorial disputes. And if Marco discovers our involvement before we're properly prepared for his response," his lieutenant asked carefully, "then we ensure our leverage is already firmly secured before that discovery becomes relevant," Vittorio said coldly, genuine calculation evident in his careful planning. That evening, as Daniela left her yoga studio, walking her usual route home despite her earlier, dismissed unease, 2 men approached from a parked vehicle, their movements carrying practiced, calculated efficiency. "Miss Rossi," one man said, his tone carrying deceptive politeness, "we need you to come with us. Mr. Bianchi has requested your immediate presence at an urgent meeting." Daniela hesitated, genuine confusion evident despite her attempted composure. "Marco didn't mention anything about an urgent meeting tonight." "It developed rather suddenly," the man said smoothly, though something in his careful, controlled demeanor triggered Daniela's growing, instinctive unease. "Please, we shouldn't delay." Genuine alarm building rapidly, despite her attempt at maintaining calm, Daniela considered her limited options. Before she could properly react or attempt escape, the second man moved quickly, his grip firm and unyielding as he guided her toward their waiting vehicle. "This isn't necessary," Daniela protested, genuine fear evident beneath her attempted composure. "I can simply call Marco myself to confirm." "That won't be necessary," the first man said firmly, his earlier polite pretense finally dropping entirely to reveal genuine, dangerous authority. "You're coming with us regardless of your preference in the matter." Within minutes, Daniela found herself transported to an unfamiliar warehouse across the city, genuine terror building steadily as she processed the obvious deception and danger surrounding her sudden, forced abduction. Meanwhile, Marco had been finalizing preparations for his planned proposal when Antonio arrived with urgent, alarming news. "Sir, we have a serious problem," Antonio reported, genuine alarm evident in his controlled voice. Daniela never returned home from her yoga class tonight. Her neighbor reported witnessing what appeared to be a forced abduction near her apartment building. Genuine terror flooded through Marco's chest, years of carefully maintained composure shattering completely at this devastating news. "Who's responsible?" he demanded sharply, his voice carrying barely controlled fury. "We're still gathering information," Antonio said carefully. "Though given recent intelligence suggesting Vittorio Sallucci's organization has been investigating your relationship with Daniela, that seems the most likely source of this dangerous action." Marco felt cold, controlled rage building steadily beneath his genuine terror for Daniela's safety. "Mobilize everyone immediately," he commanded firmly. "I want every resource dedicated toward locating her. And I want Vittorio to understand precisely what consequences await him for threatening someone I love." As Marco's organization scrambled to gather intelligence regarding Daniela's location, his phone rang with an unfamiliar number, genuine dread building as he answered immediately. "Marco Bianchi," Vittorio's voice said calmly, genuine satisfaction evident beneath his controlled tone. "I trust you've noticed your fiancée's unexpected absence tonight. Where is she?" Marco demanded, his voice carrying deadly, controlled fury despite his genuine terror. "Safe for now," Vittorio said, "though her continued safety depends entirely on your willingness to properly negotiate regarding certain territorial disputes that have remained unresolved between our organizations." Marco's jaw tightened with barely controlled anger. "If you harm her in any way—" "I have no interest in unnecessary violence," Vittorio interrupted smoothly. "Simply proper negotiation, Marco. Surrender your eastern shipping routes, and your beloved Daniela returns to you completely unharmed." "And if I refuse?" Marco asked, though genuine fear for Daniela's safety made this question considerably more difficult than his controlled tone suggested. "Then perhaps you'll discover exactly how thoroughly her continued safety depends on your proper cooperation," Vittorio said coldly, before ending the call abruptly. Marco stood frozen for several long moments, processing this devastating ultimatum. Genuine terror for Daniela's safety, warring against his understanding that surrendering territory represented a significant, potentially catastrophic weakness his organization couldn't easily recover from. "What are your orders, sir?" Antonio asked carefully, genuine concern evident in his expression. "I need to know exactly where they're holding her," Marco said firmly, "before I decide how properly to respond to this ultimatum. I won't simply surrender without understanding our actual options." Back within the warehouse, Daniela sat bound to a chair, genuine fear evident despite her attempts at maintaining composure. Vittorio entered the room directly, his expression carrying calculated, cold assessment as he studied her carefully. "You're the woman who's apparently captured Marco Bianchi's guarded heart," he observed. Genuine curiosity evident beneath his dangerous demeanor. "What do you want from me?" Daniela asked, genuine fear evident in her trembling voice, despite her attempt at maintaining courage. "Simply leverage," Vittorio said simply. "Marco has spent years maintaining careful emotional distance, precisely to avoid exactly this kind of exploitable vulnerability. Your presence in his life has finally provided exactly the opportunity I've been searching for." "He won't simply surrender to your demands," Daniela said, genuine conviction evident despite her fear. "Marco is stronger than you're apparently giving him credit for." Vittorio's expression carried genuine cold amusement at her defiant response. "We'll see precisely how strong his resolve remains once he properly understands what's genuinely at stake regarding your continued safety." As Vittorio departed, leaving Daniela alone with her mounting fear, she found herself thinking not of her own danger, but genuine worry about what impossible choice Marco now faced because of his love for her. Back at Marco's estate, his organization worked urgently to locate Daniela's exact position. Marco himself struggling with the genuine, agonizing decision between his organization's territorial security and the woman who had finally shown him genuine, unconditional love after years of painful rejection. "I won't simply surrender," Marco said firmly, genuine determination evident despite his obvious fear. "But I also won't risk her safety through reckless, unprepared action. We need proper intelligence before deciding our next move." as his organization continued their urgent investigation. Marco found himself confronting exactly the kind of impossible choice his years of careful emotional isolation had been specifically designed to avoid. Genuine love, creating genuine vulnerability. Precisely as his painful history had always warned him, it eventually would. 3 hours after Vittorio's chilling phone call, Antonio finally arrived with the breakthrough intelligence Marco had been desperately awaiting. "We've located the warehouse, sir," he reported urgently. "Eastern Industrial District, moderate security presence based on our surveillance. How many men are we dealing with?" Marco asked sharply, genuine focused determination evident despite his lingering terror for Daniela's safety. "Approximately 15. Based on vehicle count and observed movement patterns," Antonio confirmed. "Vittorio himself appears to be present, along with several senior lieutenants." Marco considered this information carefully, genuine calculation building beneath his controlled exterior. "I want everyone we can properly mobilize," he said firmly. "This ends tonight, one way or another." As Marco's forces prepared for the dangerous rescue operation, he found himself thinking not of tactical strategy alone, but genuine, desperate hope that Daniela remained safe despite the considerable danger surrounding her current circumstances. "Sir," Antonio said carefully, genuine concern evident in his voice, "given the personal stakes involved, perhaps you should consider remaining at the estate while we properly execute this operation." "Absolutely not," Marco said firmly, genuine determination evident in his controlled tone. "I won't simply wait passively while others risk their safety rescuing the woman I love. I'm leading this operation personally." Marco's convoy departed within the hour, moving through the city's darkened streets with disciplined, coordinated precision toward the warehouse where Daniela remained held captive. Genuine fear and determination warred within his chest throughout the tense journey, memories of Daniela's genuine warmth and laughter fueling his absolute resolve to ensure her safe return. Inside the warehouse, Daniela remained bound to her chair, genuine exhaustion evident despite her continued attempts at maintaining composure. Vittorio entered periodically, his calculated patience evident as he awaited Marco's response to his earlier ultimatum. "Your Marco seems to be taking considerable time deciding," Vittorio observed during one such visit, genuine calculated amusement evident in his tone. "Perhaps his affection for you isn't quite as genuine as you'd apparently believed." "You're wrong," Daniela said firmly, genuine conviction evident despite her obvious fear and exhaustion. "Marco simply isn't the kind of man who makes reckless decisions without proper consideration. That doesn't mean his love for me is anything less than completely genuine." Vittorio studied her carefully, something almost respectful evident beneath his calculating expression. "You genuinely believe that," he observed. "Interesting, given how briefly you've apparently known him. Genuine connection doesn't require considerable time to recognize," Daniela said, genuine strength evident in her steady voice. "Marco has shown me more genuine acceptance and care in these past months than I've experienced throughout my entire adult life. I trust him completely." Before Vittorio could respond further, one of his men rushed into the room, genuine alarm evident in his urgent expression. "Sir, we have a problem. Multiple vehicles approaching from the eastern perimeter, moving with clearly coordinated, tactical precision." Vittorio's expression hardened immediately with genuine calculated concern. "Marco's finally decided to act rather than simply negotiate," he observed grimly. "Prepare our defenses immediately." The confrontation that followed erupted with intense, chaotic urgency, Marco's forces moving with disciplined, coordinated efficiency despite the genuine danger surrounding their rescue operation. Marco himself moved through the warehouse's chaotic confusion with focused, desperate determination, his mind fixed entirely on locating Daniela safely amid the dangerous confrontation. "Where is she?" Marco demanded sharply, confronting one of Vittorio's men directly, his controlled fury evident despite the chaotic gunfire echoing throughout the warehouse's confined space. The man, recognizing the genuine danger of continued resistance, given Marco's clearly superior numbers, gestured reluctantly toward a side room. There, but Vittorio's still with her. Marco moved immediately toward the indicated location, genuine terror and determination driving his urgent steps despite the ongoing chaos surrounding him. He burst through the door to find Vittorio standing beside Daniela's chair, a weapon held with calculated, dangerous precision. "Marco," Vittorio said calmly, though genuine tension was evident beneath his controlled demeanor, given the confrontation's clearly deteriorating circumstances. "I see you've decided against proper negotiation." "Let her go, Vittorio," Marco said firmly, his voice carrying dangerous, controlled authority despite his genuine fear for Daniela's safety. "This ends now." "I don't think you're in a position to make demands," Vittorio said, though his voice carried less confidence than his earlier calculated composure had suggested. Clearly recognizing his rapidly deteriorating tactical position, Daniela, despite her obvious exhaustion and fear, met Marco's eyes directly, genuine trust and love evident in her steady gaze despite the dangerous circumstances surrounding them. "I knew you would come," she said softly, genuine conviction evident in her trembling voice. Something fierce and protective moved through Marco's chest at her genuine, unwavering trust. "Always," he said firmly, before his attention snapped back sharply toward Vittorio. "Release her immediately, or face considerably worse consequences than simple territorial dispute." Vittorio hesitated, genuine calculation evident as he processed his rapidly deteriorating circumstances. Outside the room, the sound of continued confrontation confirmed his forces were being decisively overwhelmed by Marco's superior numbers and preparation. "This isn't finished," Vittorio said finally, though genuine defeat was evident beneath his attempted defiance as he lowered his weapon slowly. Marco moved immediately once the immediate danger had passed, rushing to Daniela's side and carefully working to release her from her restraints. "Are you hurt?" he asked urgently, genuine concern evident in his careful examination. "I'm okay," Daniela said, though her voice carried obvious exhaustion and lingering fear. Frightened, but genuinely unharmed, Marco pulled her gently into his arms, genuine relief flooding through his chest as he held her close. "I was so terrified I might lose you," he admitted, genuine vulnerability evident in his voice. "I never doubted you would come for me," Daniela said softly, genuine trust evident despite her obvious exhaustion. As Marco's security team properly secured Vittorio and his remaining forces, ensuring comprehensive consequences for this dangerous, unauthorized aggression against Marco's territory and personal safety, Marco remained close beside Daniela, genuine protective determination evident in his expression. "I need you to understand something," he said quietly, genuine sincerity evident in his careful words. "Tonight has shown me clearly exactly how much you mean to me. I won't allow anything or anyone to threaten your safety again." Daniela studied him carefully, genuine warmth evident in her exhausted expression despite everything she'd endured. "I trust you completely, Marco," she said sincerely. Tonight has only strengthened that trust, rather than diminishing it. As they finally departed the warehouse together, Marco's arm protectively wrapped around Daniela's shoulders. Both processed the genuine relief of surviving this dangerous ordeal. Their bond considerably strengthened rather than weakened by the frightening circumstances they had just endured together. 2 weeks after the dangerous confrontation at Vittorio's warehouse, life gradually settled into peaceful, grateful rhythm for both Marco and Daniela. Vittorio faced serious consequences within the city's careful criminal power structure, his organization considerably weakened by his reckless, unsuccessful attempt against Marco's territory and personal safety. The immediate danger having passed completely, Marco found himself finally ready to properly complete the heartfelt proposal he'd been planning, before Daniela's frightening abduction had interrupted his careful preparations. He arranged a quiet, intimate dinner at the same restaurant where their chaotic, memorable first meeting had taken place months earlier, requesting the same private table where Daniela's nervous clumsiness had first revealed her genuine, unguarded authenticity. "This feels familiar," Daniela said, genuine warmth evident in her smile as she settled into the same seat where their unconventional courtship had first begun. "I thought it fitting," Marco said, genuine tenderness evident in his careful expression, "to properly complete what began here in this exact place. All those months ago." Daniela studied him curiously, genuine happiness evident despite her obvious curiosity about his careful, deliberate word choice. "What do you mean?" Marco reached into his jacket pocket, genuine emotion evident as he withdrew a small velvet box, carefully opening it to reveal a beautiful, elegant ring inside. "Daniela Rossi," he said, his voice carrying genuine vulnerability despite his usual controlled composure. "These past months with you have shown me exactly what genuine, unconditional love actually means. You've accepted me completely, size and all, without ever making me feel like an obstacle to overcome, rather than simply who I authentically am." Genuine tears welled in Daniela's eyes as she processed his heartfelt words, understanding clearly the significance of this moment given everything they'd shared and endured together. "I love you," Marco continued, genuine sincerity evident in every carefully chosen word. "Completely, unconditionally, exactly as you love me. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife, not simply completing an arranged family obligation, but choosing this life together because we genuinely, authentically love each other?" "Yes," Daniela said immediately, genuine joy evident in her tearful, radiant smile. "Absolutely yes, Marco," as Marco slipped the ring gently onto her finger. Genuine happiness flooding through both of them, despite the challenging circumstances that had tested their relationship so severely just weeks earlier. Several nearby diners began applauding warmly, genuine happiness evident at witnessing this heartfelt proposal. "I can't believe we're actually here," Daniela said softly, genuine wonder evident in her voice as she studied the beautiful ring now adorning her finger. "After everything that's happened, after years of both of us believing genuine, unconditional love simply wasn't available to people like us." "I've never been more certain of anything in my entire life," Marco said sincerely, genuine warmth evident in his expression. "You've shown me that true love sees beyond superficial standards, finding genuine beauty in authentic connection and mutual understanding." 6 months later, Marco and Daniela's wedding took place in a beautiful, intimate ceremony surrounded by close family and trusted friends. Both organizations' complicated criminal politics carefully set aside for this genuinely joyful celebration of their hard-won, authentic love. Isabella, Marco's mother, watched with genuine tears of happiness as her son exchanged vows with the woman who had finally helped him overcome years of painful insecurity and rejection. "I've never seen him this genuinely happy," she whispered to Antonio, who stood nearby, genuine warmth evident in his own expression. "Love has a way of healing wounds we didn't even realize we were still carrying," Antonio observed quietly, watching Marco's radiant expression as he gazed at Daniela throughout their heartfelt ceremony. As Marco and Daniela shared their first dance as husband and wife, both radiating genuine, unrestrained happiness despite the considerable challenges they'd overcome together, Marco found himself reflecting on the remarkable journey that had brought them to this joyful moment. "Do you remember," he said softly, holding Daniela close as they moved together through their gentle first dance, "how thoroughly you spilled that entire glass of wine during our very first dinner together?" Daniela laughed warmly, genuine happiness evident in her joyful expression. "I remember being genuinely mortified," she admitted. "I was certain I'd completely ruined any possibility of you finding me even remotely interesting." "Instead," Marco said, genuine warmth evident in his voice. That particular clumsy moment showed me exactly the kind of genuine, unguarded authenticity I'd been searching for throughout my entire adult life without properly realizing it. "I suppose we should genuinely thank that unfortunate Vas," Daniela said, genuine laughter evident in her voice, "for bringing us together so memorably." As their wedding celebration continued joyfully around them, both Marco and Daniela understood clearly that their unconventional journey toward genuine love, beginning with an arranged introduction neither had particularly wanted, had ultimately led toward exactly the kind of authentic, unconditional acceptance both had believed themselves unworthy of experiencing. Marco no longer viewed his considerable size as an obstacle requiring apology or explanation. Daniela no longer felt invisible or overlooked, understanding clearly that genuine beauty extended considerably beyond society's narrow, superficial standards. Together, they had built something considerably more meaningful than simple physical attraction. Genuine partnership founded on authentic acceptance, mutual understanding and unconditional love. As the evening celebration finally concluded, Marco and Daniela stood together beneath the stars, genuine contentment evident in their peaceful, joyful expressions. "I love you exactly as you are," Daniela said softly, genuine sincerity evident in her warm gaze. "Every part of you, without exception or condition, and I love you completely," Marco replied, genuine warmth evident in his tender expression. Clumsy moments, genuine laughter, and authentic heart included. Sometimes they both understood clearly now, watching each other with genuine, unwavering love beneath the peaceful evening sky. The most meaningful connections arrive not despite our perceived imperfections, but precisely because someone finally recognizes those authentic qualities as exactly what makes us genuinely, beautifully worth loving completely.